I just want to say thank you to the online education section for creating these videos. It is a challenge to do all the technical things that we've been talking about this morning, and especially Dave and Joe, thank you very much. We have struggled on our committee, on the guideline committee, to really create a system or an educational platform to help people that are thinking about writing a PMG, people that are currently writing a PMG, or people that are just reading our PMGs, because they are a little bit more complex than they were, say, 5 to 8 years ago. The first video that I was asked to make is really kind of the common pitfalls of writing an East PMG. I've been the committee chair for this for approximately 2.5 years, and I've seen really strong groups and I've seen very weak groups, and I have formulated kind of my own personal opinions as to what's going to be successful and what's not going to be successful. And I hate to say it, sometimes I can tell right from the beginning that a particular group is going to run into problems. I don't have any financial disclosures to report. The common pitfalls, the way I kind of put them together for a quick 10 to 15-minute lecture, is there's 5 of them in my opinion. Writing an East PMG is easy. That is not true. Finding a difficult topic, a broad topic, you have too many Pico questions seems to really cause problems with groups. A leader needs to lead, meaning that if you are the primary group leader, you got to step up and take control. A lack of a timeline for completion or closure often gives people a false sense of security. And then finally, poor communication, like anything that we do in our careers, is oftentimes an Achilles heel for these particular groups. Writing an East PMG is not easy. I had a very senior PMG person trained in grade. She's written 3 of these now. And she basically said that writing an East PMG with grade was the hardest, most involved academic thing that she has ever done. And I think that's really important to understand, that these are people that are seasoned. They understand grade. They've committed time to it within their planning for their academic year. And even then, it's very, very complex. It's not easy, and I think it's really important to understand that from the very beginning, that it's an all-consuming academic process. Not only are you taking time to read papers, a lot of papers, and organize, you also have to take time to learn software. You have to take time to write. You have to take time to set up meetings. You have to do some policing with people. It's an all-consuming thing, and I call it it's akin to herding cats, because to get it done, everybody has to get on the same page, and this is a volunteer organization, so you can't make somebody do something. You have to encourage them and get everybody on board with the common mission. And unfortunately, as much as people try to tell you it is, grade methodology is not intuitive. It's not something that you can pick up one day, read one single paper about grade, and then hit the ground running. It's a complex thing. It takes time to understand it. So the grade methodology, how has it changed what we do? Well, the old system was a bunch of people got together, had a couple conference calls, decided what the topic was going to be, read a bunch of papers, they scored the literature, and they came up with a group recommendation, almost like voting. The new system is not like that in any format. It is a transparent system. It follows a very specific methodology, and it aims to avoid expert opinion, which, for good or for bad, made the old guidelines very easy to write, but unfortunately not appropriate at times. To write an East PMG, you have to commit to understanding grade methodology. And as many things as we've tried to put on the web page, white papers, those sort of things, you can't avoid it. You got to spend time, and you have to learn it for yourself. The easiest way, I think, is to dedicate some time and some resources and attend a national conference. There are 2 groups that put on these conference calls, these in-person conferences throughout the country. They are very, very strong groups written by experts and done by experts in the field. And over the course of 2 or 3 days, you are submerged into this grade methodology, and at the very end, you understand the methodology as well as you also understand how to use the software. Before you do it, I think it's really understand, how does grade fit into East? And so we spent about 6 months in 2015 creating a white paper, really a step-by-step how-to guide, how to do a grade East PMG. It's a very large white paper. It's 70-some pages. It gets right into the nitty-gritty, but it is kind of the playbook, what we felt like as our playbook for a writer or writing group to go forward. So please, you have to read that. You should really go to a grade course. And there's other things on the East website, the develop of the PMG part of it, that will help supplant some of these gaps. But unfortunately, the onus is on you. The onus is on the leader. You really have to understand grade, and you have to dedicate some time to it. Grade also requires a use of unique software packages. These are not written by Microsoft or Google. These are something that are really specific for writing PMGs. We use a software package called Grade Pro GDT, and these make the tables that you see in all of our PMGs. RevMen is another sort of software platform that creates our forest plots. The software is good, but like Grade, it's not completely intuitive. We have people within our grade sort of East community that are experts, quote-unquote experts in the software packages, but they can't do it for you. You have to kind of commit to understanding the software, and then when it's time, sitting down with them to really fine-tune your skills so that you can get these plots and tables created. Oftentimes groups will try to tackle a very difficult subject because, like everybody else, we want answers to the very hard questions. Oftentimes groups will make a very broad topic and they'll create too many questions, too many Pico questions. I think it's really, really important to understand the literature prior to forming your question. If you are very excited about a particular thing in trauma or surgical critical care, you need to spend some time on your own understanding the literature within that field of study. If no literature exists for a particular question that you're focusing on, your project is going to be doomed. The whole idea of grade and the methodology is creating a question and then exploring the literature to see what the question, how can it be answered by the literature in front of you. If there is no literature, you cannot answer the question, and you will spend an inordinate amount of time researching, getting the papers, reviewing the papers, and figuring out, hey, this doesn't fit with what we want to ask or answer. So you need to spend time. You need to know the literature a little bit. You don't need to be an expert, but you just have to realize that, yes, there is literature out there that can help us answer this particular question. How do we go forward? You aren't looking for gaps. This is different from writing a paper or a thesis. You're not looking for gaps. You're actually looking for the opposite of gaps. You're looking for literature. You're looking for the evidence. Your job is going to take all that literature and create recommendations from it. Pico questions will make you focus, and that's why we force people. The grade methodology says you've got to understand Pico population, intervention, comparison, and outcome questions. You can't write a PMG on all of VTE for East. That is too big. It is too hard of a topic. But what you can do is narrow the subject down with your Pico questions. And an example I gave here is, let's look at chemoprophylaxis on pediatric patients after injury. That's a very narrow sort of field within the whole VTE sort of argument. It's not covered by the current CHEST guidelines. This is a perfect opportunity for us to write a PMG, and we just did so. But writing it on all of VTE, it's too big, it's too cumbersome, you're not going to be able to do it. The other thing is, don't reinvent the wheel. We had this happen a couple times where people are very interested in a particular field. They haven't explored the literature, and lo and behold, there is already a high-quality PMG in that particular field. The one that I also guess is we were approached about writing nutrition guidelines. We said, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's write some nutrition guidelines. And in the summer of 2016, Aspen and FCCM wrote really strong nutrition guidelines. So it makes no sense for us to reinvent the wheel and to repeat these efforts because, again, another high-quality group applied grade to the literature and answered some of the questions that were being proposed. I think it's really important to check the National Guideline Clearinghouse. The National Guideline Clearinghouse is sponsored by AHRQ. They are the best of the guidelines out there. If you're thinking about writing a particular PMG, a high-quality PMG with East, you're going to search the literature for the topic, but I think it's also important to search if another guideline was previously written. In the end, we are writing our submissions, we are writing our guidelines rather, to submit to the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery. So as you're putting this together, as you're formulating your questions and your format, you need to understand what their editorial restrictions are going to be, specifically their figure and table limits. A leader needs to lead. So if you are proposing a topic or a very specific Pico question, you're going to be the leader of that particular group. I think it's our job on the committee to partner you with what we consider a senior East expert in the subject material. And you can see that there's people included in this slide that have partnered before to give us guidance. This really helps the group to focus their Pico questions with what the experts thinks we need to address. These experts know the literature probably better than anybody else, so they can guide you to what is there and what's not there, and allow you to really create a discussion in the paper that is of high quality. It provides credibility for a quote-unquote organization of assistant professors. This was told to me by one of the editors of the Journal of Trauma, that EAST guidelines, some of them have a lower quality because if you look at the author list, they lack experts in the field. And for other senior people in the world of trauma, these guidelines may have less strength. And then finally, I think it's really important when we assign a senior or we help guide you to a senior expert and they agree to participate, this person is not there to review papers, they're not there to extract literature, they're there really as an expert panel member. They're there to help guide you through the Pico formulation process, any sort of problems that arise during the creation of the guideline, and of course they're going to be really key when the writing of the manuscript occurs to frame the discussion and to frame the comments within the paper. Lack of a timeline. This really kills a lot of groups. I think we all need deadlines. If we don't have a deadline, we'll keep putting them off. By the nature of our jobs, there's many, many balls in the air at one given time. This is one of those balls, and attention needs to be dedicated to it, and a deadline really helps people prioritize. It's important to create an honest timeline, not only with yourself, but also with your team. I had a couple people that had a very known academic deadlines in a particular season, and they wanted their PMG to be due during that same time. Well, that's not realistic because those other academic priorities may or may not take priority over writing the EAST PMG. So I think it's really important to be honest with yourself that, hey, you know, in the fall of 2018, we're really going to get this wrapped up, and this is why, because it's a nice window this summer, et cetera, the team can get on board and everybody can get kind of behind that sort of timeline. Most groups take about 18 months from the time that we say, okay, let's do an EAST PMG on fill in the blank, to the time that the paper is submitted to the Journal of Trauma. The really slick groups, or really dedicated groups, can do it in a year, but what I've found, it's honestly about an 18-month process. Groups that start taking more than 2 years run into big problems, and the biggest problem is that they likely are going to get scooped by another group. We had a EAST PMG that was a very high quality, very much important to the field of surgery, and it lingered. And it lingered over 2.5 years, and then all of a sudden we found that another group in a different journal had written a very similar PMG to the one we were working on. And so at that point, that group really kind of was dead in the water. And we don't want to see that happen to anybody. And then finally, if you wait too long, the papers that you have accumulated to answer your questions, they become old and they become stale. And unfortunately, if you wait too long, another sort of literature review will need to be done. And when that occurs, that's honestly starting over. You're really pretty much at square one, and groups will suffer from that. Few really kind of succeed after that process is reinitiated. Communication torpedoes a lot of groups. It's really hard in this day and age to do all of your communication by email. We get so many emails from so many different people that it's really hard to have an EAST email for PMG stand out for somebody who's gets hundreds a day. So I think it's really, really, really important that communication pathways are very clear. We have tried to create clear communication lines between the committee. The committee is organized such that there is a chairperson, that is myself currently, and then we have 4 task force leaders that take on each of the subject materials within an EAST PMG sort of library, and that includes injury prevention, emergency general surgery, surgical critical care, and trauma. The entire committee has about 25 EAST members, and each of the members are assigned a PMG. So not only does the chairman or chairperson know about all the PMGs that are going on, and the task force leader knows about the handful of PMGs that are going on within a subject material, every member of the committee, all 25 of them, have a PMG or two that they are directly reporting to. So they know exactly at any given point where people are in the process. So I think that straight line of communication, when a group runs into problems, they know who to contact. There's not this black box of the East PMG committee. Rather, there are individuals that they know they can communicate with, ask questions, and get help from. And it's really, really important that if something's going on, you just got to pick up the phone and give us a call. I can't tell you the number of times people will finally pin them down and will ask, what's happened, what's going on, and something personal happens in their lives, which happens. But if we would have known about it, we could have prepared instead of waiting 6 to 8 months and then get scooped by another organization writing a PMG. So if things are slowing, give us a call. Oftentimes groups just don't understand, the next phase. How do I do outcomes? Or what literature how do I extract this literature? Just pick up the phone and give us a call. Like I said before, personal issues come up. I totally get it. We're not immune to this. We're people too. And so if that happens, just let us know. We can sort of help, provide help, adjust the timeline, those sort of things. And then sometimes people just aren't interested anymore. These are really encompassing topics, difficult subject material, a real sort of consuming academic process, and for some people, it's too much, and they just can't do it. It's taking away from them from other things that they want to do, and it's okay. It's okay to reassign a leader or a group of people. We just have to know about it. I have a phone. I have a hardwired phone. I have a pager. I have a cell phone. I have a Twitter account. I have all that craziness. And I always tell people, just give me a call. Just give me a call. I'm not judgmental. I just want to see what we feel like is a really important subject or material to put into a PMG succeed. And I want to make everybody that's writing a PMG be successful. I don't know how to do that if I don't know if there are problems that are brewing. And I think communication hopefully will fix those sort of things. My boss basically said that transparency is just another word for public flogging. I completely believe this. Surgeons are very much motivated by competition or the need to not look bad in front of their peers. I think the best way we can publicly flog people, quote unquote, be transparent, is by having conference calls. East has many, many conference lines. It's very, very easy to set up a conference line. All we need to know is the date and the time, and we can get you a conference line. I think this is the best way to get people on board. When groups have slowed down, a couple conference calls at regular intervals, the first Tuesday of every month we're going to have a conference call for this topic or this group, it gets things back online. Email gets just too cluttery like we talked about before. It's easy to ignore emails. It's really easy to figure out who wants to participate. They've made the effort to make the phone call, and it's very easy to get an update and assign tasks, so there is agreement by all the participants who's doing what on what sort of timeline. That can take up to 15 emails in my opinion. It can take 10 minutes on a phone call. Well, that's all I have for what I call the pitfalls of the East PMG. I want to thank again Dave and Joe and the online conference group the online education group for putting this together. I think it's going to be hopefully helpful to those people that are, again, writing a PMG, thinking about writing a PMG, or even just reading a PMG that East puts together. And again, thank you to East for allowing me to participate in what I think is really the cornerstone of our organization. So thank you very much, everybody.